We are lending from a vehicle in Europe, so we have to get onboarded or know your customer, AML compliance, all of that needs to be done to a European standard. So sometimes that takes a little bit of extra time relative to, say, in better times, lending money from your local bank. So the KYC plus the credit policy, the credit process, again, maybe a month or so.
And how about the corporate governance internally? How many layers of approval?
Well, I mean, we're lean and mean, but of course, to get a file past the investment committee, there needs to be unanimous consent among the 4-member investment committee. So
it's a 2 layers approval, probably management, and then it goes to IC.
Yeah, management. We have what we call a pre-ICC, where we structure it, make sure it looks just right. There's many different checks we do with all of the various KYC, AML. There's local, the CDR with the local debt obligations. I mean, there's a lot of heavy-duty credit work that goes into it. But by the time it gets to the final investment committee, as long as it's unanimous, should be the final step.
Given the type of the instrument, are you requesting any collateral?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the cliche would be bespoke. So, I mean, every situation is different. We're in a crisis environment, so we try to be creative. We try to be flexible, but you know, there should be some level of collateral to help strengthen the credit. So that could be, let's say, a partial cash contribution on the behalf of the borrower, personal guarantee, corporate guarantee from a related entity somewhere, potentially, if it comes down to it, a real estate mortgage, but case by case, I would say.
For you, Michelle, how is the corporate governance internally within the fund?
It's very similar. We're going to have an investment committee, but before the investment committee, there's going to be a lot of pre-work that will be done. Yeah.
All right. And any collateral are expected?
It's really going to be case by case, but definitely there has to be something. Yeah.
Saad, are you? Can companies come and apply directly to IFC? How does it really work?
You mean here in Lebanon,
yeah.
or? Okay. Of
here
course.
in Lebanon, and specifically for those people, can anyone come and approach IFC for an investment ticket?
I think what's important is that, you know, IFC is a very, very sizable organization, and so for us on a case-to-case basis, depending on the ticket side, as an international organization, we like to crowd invest in funding. So if it's a small business that has some ticket size or a project that is, let's say in Lebanon, below $10 million, then we refer them to specialized funds like the one, for instance, depending on the sector, depending on the focus. In general, we do receive requests from companies directly for as long as it ticks all the boxes for IFC, which is why IFC, there's this additionality measure that we have to make sure that makes sense. Then we measure the impact that this project would create. Then we measure profitability. If these 3 elements meet to a certain level, then there's a role for IFC to play. Otherwise, we usually defer to intermediaries that have the capacity to offer that service. We're in the business of crowding in, not crowding out. But in the context of Lebanon today, we have to be realistic. It's not an easy situation because cost of funding in Lebanon is very, very high. And this is driven by the fact that there's a certain macroeconomical challenge that Lebanon is living through, which we all know of. So for us, for as long as we can minimize or nullify that risk, we're happy to talk to investors. And in fact, we are today, unlike all other DFIs, we are looking at a pipeline of investments that are out of Lebanon. The companies are in Lebanon, they operate in other markets, but for one reason or another, they are able to minimize the Lebanon country risk. Where for that to happen, this is like more of an immediate term, but we are looking at Lebanon's future and how Lebanon would kick off that recovery, as I mentioned earlier, and reconstruction of the economy and the restructuring of the financial sector, which is very crucial for us to be able to do business. That would be the stage that IFC could scale up a lot of activities in the country at all levels. Today, it's selective, it's opportunistic. Unfortunately, it's not part of a strategic approach because of the situation in the country.
Again, in the Lebanese context, would IFC invest in fund managers like the one around you,
yes,
since you're not going to be going directly to those businesses?
When it comes to funds, you know this very well, Corinne, we don't we usually invest in funds that are regional rather than country focused. So in the context of the one that Michelle is running, we know them very well. We helped them set up the Lift ventures, and we're looking at the opportunity to invest within the fund. There are certain requirements that have to be met, including the reach, the pipeline, the fund manager experience, but also is this a space that would provide that additional value that IFC can provide. But yes, we are open to business when it comes to funds.
So Michelle talks about 50 million, Mark talks 170 million. IFC would say an envelope of how big?
Depends again on the cases. So for
A
instance,
number aside.
you need a number. In general, we have a pipeline in Lebanon today of $170 million.
170. Here you go, Mark.
Bring it over.
So
Against all odds.
Yeah, so I guess what you see on this panel is really a mix of investors. I represent IM Ventures, I'm the CIO. We're as well proposing a convertible revenue loan fund for SMEs that are at the growth stage. So I think you see in front of you a diversified pool of investments that start with equity to loan to direct participation intermediaries, and for us is pure convertible. So I think I laid the ground in terms of investment. Would anyone have any question to any of our investors? Or should I sum it up, please? Yeah. No. Yes. Yeah, so I guess, Michelle, the question is to you. The question is, do you have a specific amount out of the 50 million that is dedicated to early stage businesses other than growth stage, in fact?
It depends. I have to ask our fund manager, Amin, but no, I think we're going to focus mostly on growth stage. And the reason why is because there are very few impact funds in the region. And if we want to attract investors, we have to take the least risks possible. We have to have very good return on this fund. And with growth stage, we are maximizing our chances of getting a good return. And it's important for one of the first regional impact funds of the region. However, what I wanted to add is that in addition to these types of funding opportunities, especially for early stage, if you feel that you have an impact, whether social or environmental, you should also consider applying for grants, because there is a lot of grant funding coming to Lebanon, a lot. And the grant funding is coming to SMEs. It doesn't necessarily have to go to an NGO. So there are programs like Oxfam had a program, Beritech has the Agri-Tech program, they have the WE4F program. Just sign up to Beritech's newsletter and you will see the opportunities. Bloom is an accelerator program that supports SMEs. All these programs are providing grants to entrepreneurs, especially at the early stage. And what we've seen is that the most successful growth stage organizations we've supported have done 5 or 6 accelerator programs. Even if they didn't necessarily needed it, they needed the capital and there was nothing else available. So they got the money from all these grant projects and accelerator programs, and it helped them grow. So I encourage you to look at that.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other question? So in a nutshell, $500,000, $1 million, $1 million, and IFC
Unlimited.
is unlimited. Yeah, please. Hello.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, this is very interesting to know. One question I wanted to ask about interest rates. So let's say it's a loan or convertible. What's the interest rate and like what's the period of return? Is there like a grace period and then yeah?
We're going to ask this question to every investor sitting, including you, Saad. Michelle.
I actually don't have an answer because it's really going to be case by case.
A bracket of interest. You don't have a bracket of interest?
Do we have a bracket? No. It's going to be case by case.
I mean, any trend brackets that you're seeing in Lebanon, taking into consideration the country risk? You have to say a number or a bracket. Anywhere around 15%, 10 to 15% would be for Al-Fanar. Cedar Oxygen would propose.
Yeah, no, sure. I break it into three groups. So in terms of tenor, the CapEx and the renewable finance can be a maximum of 3-year term. The trade is on a revolving facility. So you just draw down on a short-term basis up to 180 days. The pricing is comparable among all three. So it's about 6.5%, 7%, 7.5%, 8%, up higher single digits annually in dollars.
Saad?
Again, it's case by case, but it also depends on the instrument that is being put together. If it's a senior loan that takes into account a certain period, IFC can go as far as 2 years of a grace period and up to 10 years for financing. But in the context of Lebanon, the spread is quite high now. For us, it's actually skyrocketing. It's 13 to 15%. But this is where I was referring to blending that. De-risking Lebanon means that you can actually acquire some concessional finance and soft and donor-based finance that would bring that back to certain levels that are acceptable. There are solutions called interest buy-down solutions where you actually bring it back or de-risk it so that it's financeable. At this stage, if you go straight senior loan, it's not doable, and it's because of Lebanon's very, very high risk and very high spread value.
And
But if it's another type of instrument, short-term trade finance, then it's a whole different ball game.
So short-term can start with 6 up to 13. Equity probably exit 5 to 7 years with an average bracket of 10 to 15%. IFC keeps the answer loose, and IM Ventures would say a bracket of 8% to 15%, 5 years, 2 years, 5 years term, 2 grace period. Any last words from the panelists? I guess we have to close. Last words of hope,
Nope.
Mark.
Hope springs eternal. No, nothing profound other than to say if anything that was mentioned is interesting, by all means, we're open for business. And I know that it's actually.
How can they apply
Yeah,
to Cedar
just
Oxygen?
come, a website, we can put you in touch with the right people. We have fresh dollars to lend. We're happy to take on new clients. So please do reach out if there's a need.
Michelle, Saad, last words.
So for me, hope is social entrepreneurs. And basically, just to give you an example, during the crisis, our portfolio, they all had a record year because social entrepreneurs, their mission is to solve a problem. So the more problems there are, the more they sell, the more clients they have. Just an example, sitting here, Zena Saab, the co-founder of SC Factory, they have a coding bootcamp, and they launched a service to provide remote HR services to organizations outside of Lebanon. Since the crisis, they have way more clients than before. Fabricate, they collect secondhand clothes and they sell them.
Michelle, one word of hope.
Social entrepreneurs, support them. And if you are an entrepreneur, become a social entrepreneur.
Saad.
Voilà.
One word and I stop talking. Okay, so it's advocacy. Please advocate this sector to be part of Lebanon's Build Back Better agenda. And because there's a huge opportunity for making this sector like the most competitive sector in the context of Lebanon, where a lot of tools are available to provide finance. So please advocate for this sector to take the sustainable / climate friendly / digital in the agenda of digitization, the economy. This sector could also play a big role. So the next chapter for Lebanon, I hope that the government can adopt a policy to adopt this sector, but without you pushing and advocating, I think it might be a bit difficult. So please advocate.
Thank you, Saad. Thank you, panelists, and thanks everyone for attending.